Hi, I'm Chris Neville. I play keyboard 1 in the orchestra of the Lion King National Tour. North American tour, technically, because I have done Canada as well. This is my 17th year with the company. It would be 18 in July. And this is my last stop here in Columbia, South Carolina. I mean, I'm not done, because I'll probably end up coming back to sub.
It is the case.
But this will be, yes. Does anyone ever really leave the Lion King? Few do. So, so I expect to be coming back to sub, but this is my last stop as full-time. I got hired as a local in Boston, which is where I live. Which was the only 32-week run in 2000, and that was in 2004. That's the only long haul we did. I think the second longest run was 14 weeks. But yeah, that's where I started. I started as a local. Partway through, they offered the tour, and I thought, well, I'll go for 6 months. So. And it just kind of, the 6 months kept getting longer and longer and longer, and here I am. Oh, never. Oh, never.
Right.
Oh, Lord. You know, I had been, you know, so much of my career was as a freelance musician. I mean, I started working as a full-time professional musician in the late 1970s, or mid-1970s really, after college. And by the early 90s, I had started freelancing more and more and more. The last year that I actually checked to see how many groups I had played with was around 1993. And I had played in, I think it was 82 separate groups that year, and it was somewhere around 225 performances. So to come to something like this and stay this long, that was not part of my, I just never expected it. Then again, when you get right down to it, I haven't expected most of what's happened to me throughout my career. I mean, I've had a really fairly wide range of musical experiences. All I ever wanted to do was play music. I wanted to perform. I just loved the act of making music with people. And as a pianist, you know, you have the ability to play solo, but that's not as interesting to me. It's the collaboration, the give and take, which is, I guess, why I was drawn to jazz before I even knew what it was. Playing a show it's a different kind of discipline altogether. You have to be very focused, of course. You have to you can't get bored and inattentive, because trouble may ensue. But you know, I didn't seek to become a theater musician. It's another thing that just kind of happened. When I moved to Boston in the 1980s, I lived in Portland, Maine before that, and I had, I guess, come to the attention of a lot of older musicians that took a great interest in me. I mean, I've just had, this is where luck comes in. I guess luck and talent and hard work. I got so lucky because I got to play with a lot of people that came through, and they took an interest in me because it wasn't all that common to see this young hippie kid that was interested in jazz and was a pianist. And so when I got to Boston, I was already hooked up to a certain degree with a lot of really great musicians. The one that was the biggest help for me was a trumpet player named Herb Pomeroy, who taught at Berklee College of Music for 40 years or so. He played with Charlie Parker when he was a kid. He subbed in Ellington's band. He had a big band of his own. He was extraordinarily influential as a teacher and arranger, taught thousands of people about arranging for large jazz orchestras. And he liked me a lot. And he had me sub in his band. Now, so much of what has happened to me as this young guy was I got thrown into situations where I was working with musicians that were so far above my level. And that was a recurring theme throughout the 80s and 90s. And what happens is it brings things out of you that you don't even know you had or that existed. They raise your level, but also you get to see what is the standard you're aiming for. And it's a lot more personal. I mean, growing up listening to recordings, it's just like, sure, you want to be like those people. The recordings are the big teacher. College was like the little teacher. It provided the foundation in terms of nomenclature, organization, etc. But recordings and working were the big teachers because it taught you what to aim for. But there's a big difference between learning from a recording and then suddenly when you're the youngest and weakest person in the band, and these are people with enormous ranges of experience that are willing to say to you, yeah, that's okay, but here's what you can do. So Herb was extraordinarily influential to me. So was another multi-reed player named Dick Johnson, who was not a teacher, but he had done a variety of things, played alto, soprano, alto, tenor, baritone, saxophone, clarinet, world-class clarinet player. I guess I only heard him play flute once or twice. He became best known to the world as a clarinet player that Artie Shaw asked to front the Artie Shaw, I don't want to call it a ghost band because Artie Shaw was still very much alive. And for those listeners that aren't familiar with him, he was a superstar in big bands in the 1930s, and I think it was in 1941 he just walked away from the business altogether, completely. Never played again in public because he didn't like so much about the way the music business operated. I don't know if I would have invested in me part. I don't know, that's a little hard to, it's hard for me to step outside of myself enough to really answer that. Things were different in that era. There wasn't, I mean, we're talking about really from nearly 40 years ago now. Music education geared towards jazz is huge now. It's all these, it's one of the oddities about this kind of music because the appreciation for it in the United States has become less and less and less over time. Yet it is taught more and more and more and more. And there are so many graduates of music schools that have had a extensive training in jazz that what are they going to do? There's fewer places to perform. They're kind of stuck. They have to get teaching jobs or they're just not staying in the business at all. That was very different back then. There were the three powerhouse schools, Berklee College of Music, University North Texas, and Miami, and University of Miami. Those were the three powerhouse schools. And I think because I I came out of Portland, Maine, so it was like right away it was just like weird, you know. He looks like a rock and roll weird hippie, but he's, you know, he's doing it. And they liked the older guys liked the fact that there was a young person with enthusiasm and a certain amount of talent, and they liked that part of it, and it kind of carried forward from there. But you know, it's funny. I didn't see myself as even becoming a full-time musician. My whole path was I thought I was going to be a science or math teacher.
Wow.
That's where I was headed.
Did you go to school for that, or
no? Well, yes, I did, and then after my first year of college, I realized that it was a giant mistake, and I really was confused and didn't really know what to do next. I never thought about becoming a professional musician. I didn't know anyone who was a professional musician growing up. My grandmother had been a music teacher, elementary school choral teacher. My mom had been an elementary school, just first and fourth grade teacher. So, and I had other relatives that were teachers. So there was the whole thing about education was strong. And I was a great student until late in high school, when I kind of went into the doldrums and didn't know what the heck I wanted to do with. I kind of really didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, except it really wasn't working. And so it was after a year of college, I was just like, this isn't working. Quit. Went back to music school where I had been going at the University of Maine in the music program. Then I went to Berkeley. Then I went to another branch of the University of Maine that had a fledgling jazz program. And then I just started working. So I didn't graduate from a four-year college. I got a two-year associate's degree, and I just kind of worked on teaching myself after that. I would say that, and this is what I would say for anyone contemplating a career as a musician in any genre, there's this many people that are competing for that much success. So you have to be talented, you have to be extraordinarily lucky, and you always have to approach it from the standpoint of, you know, maybe I'm just not quite good enough yet. Because the business has shrunk enormously. I mean, the low tier, I mean, you have to make a living. That's the whole thing. You have to make a living somehow in life, unless you're lucky enough to have a patron or an income from somewhere. The low tier of the business, where you could make money doing all these anonymous gigs, of which I've done plenty, that's gone. The middle tier is very, very shrunken, and all that's left is really the top now. And the top's pretty small and getting smaller. Well, there's a couple of things. I mean, it's just like I don't really see it happening anytime soon. I mean, ultimately, you have to get bodies in seats that will pay. Pay being the operative word here. To see live music, it's a multiple whammy now because of COVID. So that's one. The other one is, it used to be that the music industry, and now I'm talking about the larger music industry now, recording, there was the balance between income from recording and balance from touring. Touring is kind of gone, touring is like tough, it's gone by the wayside. Money hasn't really gone up proportionate to the cost of living in many cases. And recording, it's hard to make money from recording now because between pirating and streaming, it's really tough for artists to make money from that. So in terms of how could we get it back to a bigger thing, there has to be a fundamental change in how people spend their money on music. I can't tell you how many people over the years have said to me, "Oh man, I got to tell you, we loved your CD. We made copies for our friends. They love it too." And it's like, you know, you have two choices. You can either say, "Oh, thank you. That's really nice to hear," or while you're thinking, and then you don't say what's really on your mind, which is like, you know, great. You just told me that you basically bought something for $1, and now I'm going to get 1/7 of that dollar because you gave it to all your friends. But it's a mentality of the music should be free thing. But I mean, artists have been fighting this for years. This is not a new phenomenon. It's just been accelerated by, you know, first Napster, and then it just kind of went on from there. It's, you know, I mean, the streaming services are great, but if anyone's ever looked into what Spotify pays artists, it'll make you cry. You can't live off that.
Yeah.
I want to go back to something because I kind of skipped the whole thing because you asked me about getting into the discipline of musical theater. So I'm going to back up a little bit and tie into the previous part. So when I came from Portland, Maine to Boston, and I had these people that recommended me, and then all of a sudden I was working with a much higher class of people than I was working with. It wasn't, some of it was kind of visible types of work. A lot of it wasn't, but it was the top tier of musicians doing these jobs that are kind of semi-anonymous. You know, whether you're playing in a hotel or a restaurant or corporate gigs or weddings, stuff like that. But the level of musicianship was very high. And then when we would, you know, some of them were like bona fide, real concert experiences. Certainly some of those were. But anyway, with these Boston musicians, many, not all, but many of them taught at Berklee College of Music. Some had other teaching jobs. So on breaks, we would hang out, and a lot of them would talk about playing shows. And I didn't really, you know, I had heard about musical theater because my old teacher in Maine there was a regional theater up in central Maine called Lakewood, where he had worked for years, and they did, I don't know, I think they assembled all the productions there. So I knew that this world existed, but I didn't really pay attention to it. But the Boston guys all talked about playing shows. And in my mind, I realized, oh, if they're all doing this, well, then this is probably like a really good class of musicians that play shows. So maybe, you know, maybe I'll get recommended by that. See, because my whole trajectory in the business has been entirely based on recommendations. It hasn't been, you know, it's like I don't send out resumes. I don't call people. There's no headhunters or anything. It's hey, we're stuck for Saturday. Any piano players do you know of? And this is how I got to what I mentioned earlier about working in 82 or whatever different groups in 1992. It started from, we need a sub, and for whatever it was, and then if you're a good sub, people remember that, they tell their friends. As long as you know, are sober, on time, good, and most importantly, do not try to poach the gig while you're subbing. It's okay to say, hey, thank you, if you ever need anybody, here's my number, please, I hope you'll call me again. You go further than that into the realm of trying to take somebody else's job, it's bad karma and bad business, because you won't get a recommendation from that piano player ever again. So this is how I got into playing musical theater. My name got around, and then I got a call from the contractor at North Shore Music Theater, about suburban theater about 25 miles outside of Boston. And the contractor called and said, "Hey, we need someone to play a show on, you know, between such and such." I think it was a 3-week run of Into the Woods. And I said, "Oh, I'm interested," because, you know, dollar signs went off in my head. And I looked at my calendar, and I'm just thinking to myself, okay, I only have to sub out of 4 gigs. I can probably get out of all 4 of them too without creating any business hassles, because you've got to be careful about subbing out of gigs too. People take note of that. And he said, "Well, wait a second." He says, the contract says here you have to provide a Yamaha DX7II. I said, "Oh, you mean a Yamaha DX7 II? Yes, I have one of those." And then that led to, I did a good job on that, and then I got hired back for more shows over the time, and that's how I learned how to play shows. And then because of that, suddenly I started getting recommended for the downtown theater jobs, where a show like the Gazelle Tour, Lion King Gazelle Tour, for example, would come to town and hire a number of local musicians to augment the orchestra. We don't do that on Rafiki, but on Gazelle we did. And then I got into the downtown thing, which led to my first tour of Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat. And then it's all about building your reputation. But for me, the playing shows thing was, although I knew nothing about musical theater, which is a real anomaly for a keyboard player playing shows, because most keyboard players that play shows have been introduced to musical theater as an early age. I came from a place of complete unawareness, and so this is how reputations become established. Now, concurrent with all of this musical theater thing, my musical theater experience started at this Into the Woods in 1989. Right about that time, because again of being around the new face in Boston, and I started getting calls to play Mondays at the El Morocco in Worcester, Massachusetts. And because Mondays at that period in the late 1980s, jazz was having a little bit of a resurgence, and there were still nationally too. And there was a little circuit that was going on where horn players would come around and they would play one of the clubs in Boston for like Wednesday to Saturday or Thursday to Saturday or something like that. And then they would do a Saturday, Saturday afternoon in Portland, Maine. And I was part of that in the late 70s, where I got to play with Sonny Stitt, Al Cohn, and others, among others. Then they would go back to Boston, do Saturday night there. They would do Sunday at the Press Room in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, where I worked from, I think, 99 to 2003. And then Mondays, they would do the El Morocco in Worcester. As things got busier through the 80s, the New York rhythm sections didn't want to come up. If the New York rhythm sections came up to do the Boston thing, they wouldn't stay for Monday, because Sunday had a house band, and Monday was a house band too. So that's how that was like another thing up, and a presenter got to know me. And I worked with a whole raft of people at the El Morocco too. And then presenter called me up and he said, the saxophonist Benny Carter is coming to the Regatta Bar and needs a pianist for a Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And that began my association with Benny Carter. For your listeners who may not be aware of him, this is somebody that made his first recording into one of those giant RCA Victor horns in about 1927 or so. Well, that's the first documented one. I think that he thinks he recorded in 1925, but isn't sure, and recorded all the way up into the 90s. Jazz legend, Lifetime Grammy Award, Library of Congress Award, ASCAP Lifetime Award, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's another one that liked my playing, and I went on to tour the U.S., Europe, Asia. I think there were 7 or 8 recordings with him. This was 90s. Yeah, Benny Carter was 90s. I think 88 was the first time I worked with him. And then he retired in, I think 97 was the last time. He retired at 90 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, he was a legend. Yeah.
And, wow.
But you asked me about musical theater and the discipline so long ago.
Yeah.
So somehow along this whole playing shows thing,
Yeah.
my entire career has been, the theme that runs through this is, I didn't really look for a lot of different things. They just kind of, I just tried to be good, be sober, on time, prepared, and things just kind of happen. You develop for me, it's like you live or die on your reputation. And you get recommended for things. And so I was already established as a keyboard player for playing shows in Boston. And Lion King came to Boston. In 1988, as I mentioned, that's when I met Benny Carter. And it was just a kind of a run-of-the-mill horn player comes to town, we play his book, thanks us at the end of the 3-night engagement. Okay. 1989, it happened again, the fall of 1989. And this time, he asked me if I had anything any recordings of my own. I said, I don't have anything. I have this 4-song demo. He said, well, would you send it to me? I said, of course. So I sent it to him. A couple of weeks later, he phoned and told me how much he enjoyed it and said, we'll be doing something. And I was like, okay. I just thought he was being nice. A couple of weeks later, he phoned up and said, might you be available on such and such a date for a recording in New York, and with Phil Woods, George Mraz, Kenny Washington. Now, these are all names that I knew, had seen multiple times, and this is, the cream of the crop. This is the big time now. And I was shocked and said I'd love to do it. So we went and did the recording, and in a month or two later, before the recording came out, I played a quartet job in Rhode Island with a tremendous trombonist named Hal Crook. Not a household name, but someone that I looked up to as just a genius, phenomenal musician who hated traveling. Now, this is a guy that when he was 18 was on the Tonight Show band and writing arrangements for it. I'd played a lot of his arrangements over the years in a big band. And I had played with him 20 years before in Florida, when I didn't know what the heck I was doing. And he came in and I was like, oh my gosh. And so I was chatting with Hal. I said, he said, I heard you played on the recording with Benny and Phil. How did it go? I said, it went really well. I said, and Hal was playing with Phil. Hal had been asked to join Phil's little big band, and they were recording and touring at the time, and Hal was writing some of the arrangements for that too. And it was a big step up for him in terms of getting some kind of, in my opinion, very belated recognition. And I said to Hal, I said, I have to ask. I said, I knew you had done the Tonight Show band when you were young, because we play these arrangements in the Monday night big band. And I haven't seen you since that thing in Florida. So I know you've had like a big, what to me is like a huge career, but I don't really see that anybody knows who you are, you know. And then you get this gig with Phil, you know. How did you stay motivated all those years? And he said, you know, Chris, he said, and he explained to me about some of the things he had almost gotten and hadn't gotten. He said, you know, Chris, he said, I didn't get angry or anything. I just looked at it as maybe I'm just not practicing enough. And that made an enormous impression on me, because I thought, if this person who I'm just in awe of the level of knowledge that this guy knows, if his attitude is that instead of despairing that he hasn't moved up, for him to say, maybe I'm not practicing, maybe he is not practicing enough, that made a powerful impact on my thinking. A way to put it in a more, that takes back to a more simplistic time in computing technology is, I remember when you couldn't get a computer that did color screen. Yeah. And then the first ones, they went to what they could show 16 colors, and then 32 colors, and then 64, and then 128, 256, 512, exponentially, the same way capacities have gone. And I equate it as like, okay, I can paint a picture in 128 colors, but this guy can discern and paint a picture in thousands. So to have somebody that had, and Benny Carter was the same way, to work with people that have such, and this is where color comes in, have such a detailed understanding of, well, it's not just blue, this isn't green, this is, and they can name you, the blues are divided into 850 shades of blue, and they can say this is the, I can't come up with a term, but that's what, to me, it was a very telling experience on, and it was a reinforcement of, no matter how much you know, there's always more to learn. I've never participated in social media. I don't use it at all. I've never used it. It's not something I'm just not interested in it. It's pretty funny because my friends call me human Facebook, because they're always, they've been calling me that for years, the guys on tour, because they're always amazed how I know people all over the country, and we go somewhere and I'll, you know, see my friends. So the orchestra here, we've been together, many of us have been together for a while. Stefan Monson and Mike Pfau were here when I joined. Wow. Mike Pfau went away he went to the Cheetah tour. So he was gone for 3 years, and then came back. So it's like he's been here the whole time, as far as I'm concerned. Stefan also. Robert Ty, our guitarist, joined. He was hired as a local in Detroit and East Lansing, so he played the show before I did. And he joined full-time in the spring of 2010. Rue joined in December of 2007. Paul McCaffrey was a sub. He subbed before I joined, actually. He did he did Detroit and Indianapolis before I joined. Detroit as a local, and Indianapolis they just needed him for, which isn't that far from Detroit. And he started subbing on Gazelle in 2012, I think. And then he was asked to come on Rafiki full-time in 2017. He was a frequent visitor from 2012 on. Karl Szymanowicz had been on the Cheetah Tour starting in '05, I think, and then he started subbing on Gazelle in '07, and then came over in 2019 full-time. He was also with the Las Vegas company. So there's a lot of people, I think that's, oh, and Darlene Drew was a freak. She used to sub for our late flutist Kay Ragsdale, and after Kay passed in 2015, Darlene came with us full time. So we've had some pretty long relationships around here.
How do you think the guys are feeling with you going?
Oh, they're disappointed.
I'm sure they were trying to get you to stay.
They were pretty shocked. They didn't see it. Most people didn't see it coming.
Has this been a decision that you've thought about for a long time?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I've thought about it for a long time. Kay Ragsdale got sick in late 2014, and she died in April of 2015. And it was a real shocker to us because she was. We knew something was wrong, but we didn't know what. It was a state secret, basically. But it was a shock to us, and it was a shock to me because Kay was 3.5 years older than me, and this is somebody that worked continuously, ferocious schedule, for at least 30 years, and perhaps longer. And it was really frightening because she didn't get to enjoy the fruits of her labor. And it was a very startling reminder that the one commodity in life you can't buy is time. And recent events, the events over the last 2 years have been a very stark reminder about you can't buy time. And so I've been thinking about it for some time, about, how long do I think I want to do it. But I think at this point, I realized I don't want to stay too long at the party. I'm playing well right now, but it's hard for me. Physically, it's hard for me to play. It's hard for me physically and mentally to do this job at the level I want to do it at. And so that's really why I'm pulling back. I just can't do 40. I'm not willing to do 40 plus weeks a year on the road anymore. And you know what's funny about it? You know what's really funny about all this? I think it was in 1991, which was only a couple of years into when I started playing musical theater. I was doing my taxes. It was my 1991 taxes, so it was probably in 1992. And I realized, so I'm figuring out how many nights I was away, and I realized I had been away from home 156 nights that year. And something clicked in my head, and I said, oh, I gotta get more into this playing shows, because I don't want to travel as much.
18 years later.
And then it's just and then look at this.
5 nights on your own bed. Yes.
Yeah,
Wow.
Oh Lord, when I started this, when I started this tour, this is even crazier. When I started Lion King, I had never played in any band for longer than 10 months ever. At this point, it's like the well-oiled machine.
Yeah.
It's like putting on the pair of comfortable, your favorite pair of shoes, but you just, you can't be complacent. Probably a combination of the two, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing more of my friends and family again. The pandemic was rough. I mean, I stayed really isolated. I was determined to stay safe, and it was very isolated. Fortunately for me, I'm very comfortable being alone. It doesn't, you know, it's not, it was a lot harder for many that are used to being active, being reactive, being around people. I wasn't. I was very comfortable being alone. I kind of got a little tired of it. I kind of got tired of cooking after a while. But on the other hand, it was refreshing. On the other hand, no constant motion, and it acquainted me with a lifestyle that I hadn't really ever had. So I certainly thought a lot. It certainly puts your mind in gear for, okay, what are you going to do next?
Yeah.
So I'm not going to stop playing the piano,
Yeah.
but I'd like to get back to, you know, something a little more realistic.
Yeah.
You know, back before flying became a drag, when I was in this one band in the 80s and early 90s that we used to fly, well, we used to drive to everything doing one-nighters. We covered the upper Midwest down to Nashville and west of Minneapolis, and you know, we did about 85 one-nighters up to about 85 one-nighters a year. And I remember looking at, there was another band we were friends with. When we started flying more, there was another band we were friends with, and I was thinking, oh man, that'd be the bomb, to be able to fly to everything, just do like Friday, Saturday, fly out, you know, Thursday night or Friday morning, fly home Sunday, do 2 concerts, you know, fly Saturday morning, go to the next concert. That'd be the bomb. But, so I'm, you know, 100 nights a year, that'd be great. They did try, but I just said, you know, I said I'm happy to come back, but not next week.
Thank you so much, Mr.
No,
Chris.
thank you, really appreciate it.
Yes.